Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Public Utilities, Energy and Technology Interim Committee. I'm Representative Carl Albrecht. I'll be conducting today. It's Wednesday, October 11th, 2023, about 8:34 a.m. And we want to welcome those who are in the audience in person and those who are online, if any. We appreciate your attendance here today. Before we get started, I would like to introduce Matt McPherson, a new representative here that replaced Quinn Cotter. Matt, let me see if I can turn on your microphone. The light come on over there.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm Matt McPherson, represent House District 26, the West Valley area. A little bit of Magna as well. Come from a business background, but excited to be here, working with all of you here on this committee.
Glad to have you. Thanks for being here. Approval of the minutes of our previous meeting. I have a motion. Motion by Representative Shipp. Discussion to the motion. None. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. We're going to go to item number 2, draft legislation, the Utah Energy Act amendments. This was a committee bill that we opened as a result of the OED audit, and we assigned that to Representative Jack. In front of you, you have 6 items that we're going to add to that bill that have come from the strike team, a working group, UEOC. So I'm going to turn some time to Representative Jack.
All right, thank you. Yes, so working with our attorney, Scott Elder, we have drafted the committee bill as assigned. But before we presented it to this group, we have got now the concluding work from the strike team, the energy strike team that was created in this last session, and also the UEOC, their energy sub-working group. And between those groups, we've created 6 extra items that they would like to add to the committee bill for the committee's approval. And everybody should have that list. And rather than me read it, I guess I would ask if there's any specific questions on any of those items, or if you do want me to read it.
Any questions from the committee on those 6 items that would be added to that committee bill? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to do that. Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move that we make addition of the 6 items that are presented on the form in front of us.
We have a motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Representative Jack, and we'll have you proceed with the drafters and get those added to that committee bill.
Thank you. We'll work on that today.
Thank you. We're going to move to item number 3, Transwest Express Transmission Update. Joe Tippett, if you'd come up. And please introduce yourself and who you represent. You know the drill.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kara Choquette. I'm the Director of Communications and Government Relations for Transwest Express, LLC. And I'm here with my colleague, Joe Tippett, who is counsel for Transwest and helps represent us in Utah in various matters across the West. So we've just prepared a short presentation that and is displayed. Beautiful conference room. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. We appreciate the invite and also appreciate the opportunity to provide this update in October, because I get to tell you something I've been wanting to tell the legislature for over 14 years. And that is the Transwest Express Transmission Project is finally under construction. So we started construction in Wyoming last month and are just so pleased to be at this point in our very long journey. For those of you who may remember me from many legislative meetings of the past, this is a project I've been working on for, it'll be 15 years in March. But as a little bit of background for those of you who may be new, the Transwest Express Transmission Project is 732 miles of truly interregional high-voltage transmission to better connect all of us that are connected in the Western power grid. So as you know, all of the states from essentially Nebraska to California are all connected under the Western Electricity Coordinating Council, or one big grid. This map shows you the gray bars along and showing throughout the West show the existing transmission capacity, and the width of the bar shows how much capacity there is. So you can see there's quite a bit of transmission capacity north to south along the Western Interconnection, but not as much capacity east to west. And that's the solution that Transwest Express is attempting to solve for, which is adding new high-voltage bulk transmission capacity east to west. And what that looks like is the green line is 3,000 megawatts of transmission capacity connecting southern Wyoming to Millard County, Utah, near the Intermountain Power Plant, connecting into that system. And from there, Transwest would continue as 1,500 megawatts of high-voltage transmission capacity that would, again, connect that area down into essentially the Hoover Dam area. You can see from that gray blob, there's a lot of transmission capacity that's already there. So we would add new capacity east to west across the grid. It's really important as we grow, as you know, our electricity use around the nation and certainly in the West to have new transmission. There hasn't been a project like this built in decades. The next slide then kind of gets to where we're at now. So we started this process in 2008, filing the right-of-way application with the Bureau of Land Management. It's a long road. A lot of work with cooperating agencies. The state of Utah was a cooperating agency. All of the counties along the proposed and alternative routes were cooperators. We went through 8 years of environmental analysis, getting the record of decision in December of 2016, and then getting the right-of-way grant in 2017. But once you get the right-of-way grant, that doesn't mean you can start construction. There are reams of regulations and things that have to be met and have to be accomplished before you get the notice to proceed. And so we finally reached that point in April of this year. We received the notice to proceed from the BLM. Then we had a ceremonial groundbreaking event in Wyoming, where the northern terminal would be on the Overland Trail Ranch south of Rawlins, Wyoming. The governor of Wyoming came and spoke. We are so honored to have representatives from the Utah Energy Office, the Nevada Energy Office, and the Colorado Energy Office join us, along with the local community who's been very supportive of this project and our permitting along the way. And so, as I mentioned, we were finally able to start construction on September 19th of 2023. This year, we're really focused on building, a few miles of roads and a few turbine pads, really working out all of the processes that we have, including compliance with the BLM. There's a lot of ongoing oversight and monitoring by the BLM and other agencies. So we're doing that work until we can. I understand there's about 8 inches of snow that's maybe in the forecast for Rollins this week. So we'll see how much we can get done this year and then start construction again in the spring with the idea and the goal of having construction start in Utah in 2024. Other things we've accomplished recently is finding a contractor. So after an extensive process, we selected Barnard Wilson Joint Venture, 2 large companies that are working together with their expertise in transmission across the West and working in Western communities that will build the line and the AC substations along the line. And then we also are so pleased to have contracted with Siemens Energy. Siemens will be the provider of the high voltage direct current, or the HVDC terminals, that will be located in Wyoming and in Utah, again, near the IPP plant in Millard County. So that will be, we have basically 2 contractor teams, one for the line and then one that will be solely focused on the HVDC terminals. This shows you in a little more detail the route. Again, some of you may be familiar with this. It evolved over the years of the analysis as the BLM and Western Area Power Administration, who were joint leads on the EIS, evaluated all the public input, all the cooperator input, and this was the route that was selected in the final EIS. I say on the slide we have the necessary land rights and authorizations in Utah now for the project, but that's actually true of the project overall. So we have now the federal land that we need. We were very happy to have all the state land and private land easements acquired, the last mile being acquired last year. And then again, going through the permitting or authorization process in all 14 counties that the Transwest project crosses, including 9 counties in Utah. And it's not easy to see on a map of this scale, but one of the key siting criteria is to co-locate this infrastructure in existing corridors and next to existing linear infrastructure as much as possible. So in the Uinta Basin, we are essentially following the Bonanza line, the existing line that's there. And then coming out of the Millard County area, we follow essentially the route of, the interstate more or less, but also the Southern Transmission System. So the idea is that you're co-locating this infrastructure and minimizing disturbance as much as possible along the route. About 400 miles of the project is in Utah. There's another 90 plus in Wyoming, 90 plus in Colorado, and the balance of the route is then located in southern Nevada. This map helps show you where the HVDC substation or terminal would be. It's just north of the Intermountain Power Plant. We have an interconnection planned into the switchyard, the 345 kV switchyard there at IPP. So again, the idea is to help build out and add the flexibility and capacity of this area to really be an electricity hub for Utah. This also is where the bulk of the Transwest project investment is in Utah. So with about 400 miles of line, a substation, an HVDC substation is about a $500 million investment. So we're looking at an estimated investment of over $1.3 billion. This is all private capital. We're a private company, independent transmission developer whose parent company is the Anschutz Corporation, who you may know best in Utah through oil and gas activities. But this is a very significant addition to Utah's energy infrastructure, and it is for Wyoming as well. So even though there's not as many miles in Wyoming, again, that we're looking at approximately $1 billion of investment there because of the HVDC terminals. And as he said, we started construction in Wyoming on the line. We estimate starting construction on the line in Utah in 2024. And our current schedule calls to have the project in service from Wyoming to Utah to Nevada by the end of 2027. So that would be at 1,500 megawatts all the way for that first build out. And then we would go back in the next year and upgrade essentially the HVDC terminals to provide 3,000 megawatts of transmission capacity. So that would be in place by 2028. The last slide is just an excerpt that I snipped out of an October 21 report that was done by Development Research Partners and released by the Western Way that talked about the benefits of energy infrastructure in rural Utah and specifically to renewable energy development. But this was the little sidebar that they included about Transwest. So we estimate creating up to 1,300 direct construction jobs. We're already creating jobs in Utah, Joe. Landmen, title companies, surveying, geotech. There's just so much prep that goes into just the development phase of these projects. And then during construction, there'll of course be line workers, heavy equipment operators, welders. There'll be a smaller but a pretty consistent workforce at the HVDC terminal site, which we estimate will provide between 20 and 40 jobs upon completion. And then of course, as this notes, we'll be paying property taxes and sales taxes over the course of construction. So we estimate, although I believe it's conservative with the price of commodities going up, over $500 million in property tax and sales and use tax revenue for Utah over construction and the initial operations period. So, and again, I'd say, the benefit is the energy system is a collective. We are trying to strengthen that overall grid that serves us all in the West and provide that additional flexibility and capacity and resilience and the other things that are needed to really reinvest in that regional grid system. So really appreciate the support and getting to know some of you along the way and just the patience of Utah and the other states as we've worked through this very long NEPA process and all the things that come along with that. So it's just really a pleasure to be here before you today and to have the opportunity to tell you something new, other than we're still permitting, is that we're now under construction and have construction ahead of us and permitting no more. So with that, Joe and I would be happy to take any questions.
Okay, we do have some. Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the presentation and seeing that. And that's a major investment in Utah infrastructure-wise, and it's going right just north of my house. I see it every day with the work you guys are doing, so. But and I appreciate seeing the benefit with bringing the jobs and then going out. Can you give me an idea of what the long-term benefit will be for Utah? Does Utah draw power from this, or will there be any tax collected for Utah when the project's done?
Yes, there.
State your name for the record and speak into the mic, please.
My name is Joe Tippett, and I represent Transwest Express. Yes, Senator, there are significant, as Ms. Choquette indicated, $500 million of property tax revenue. It's a very big property tax.
Is that one time, is that one time while you're doing construction, or is it ongoing?
That's estimated over the life of the project, and the sales and use tax would be an additional over the estimated 4-year construction period.
So it's a significant tax-generating infrastructure project for Utah, on par with some of the major, infrastructure projects that currently exist in Utah. The real benefit for Utah is, as Ms. Choquette indicated, in 1869, UP connected the railroad here in Utah, right? And they weren't trying to get to Utah. UP was trying to get to California. But the leadership here in Utah at the time understood, they had the foresight to understand that when you build infrastructure, it begets further infrastructure and further investment. That business grows out of infrastructure, and Transwest Express is no different. It's a multi-billion-dollar investment of infrastructure in the state of Utah with a terminal in Delta.
I love that.
That's going to generate a lot of future growth.
That's awesome, and I congratulate you on this project. So there is the ability for Utah to draw power from this?
Yes, the HVDC terminal in Delta.
Yeah.
It'll interconnect with the existing IPP terminal, and that's an on and off. That's one of 2 on and off ramps for the DC portion of the line. So the first segment that we showed on the map is a DC segment from Wyoming to Delta, and then it's an AC line from Delta south. So you can interconnect on the AC line wherever you really need to.
Okay.
That's AC power. That's one of its major advantages. The DC line moves bulk power a long distance very efficiently. So you try to keep the terminals to a minimum, but you got a beginning terminal and an end terminal. And fortunately for Utah, Delta's already being built out as an energy hub, and that was the logical place to put a $500 million HVDC terminal. That's an on and off ramp here in Utah.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Congratulations on your work.
Thank you.
Representative Jack.
Yes, good morning. I apologize if you explained all this when you started the project, but I wasn't here then. So you talked about the HVDC. What voltage is that DC at? Is it 500 kV?
Yes, it's a 500 kV.
Okay.
Rated
And HVAC also 500 kV?
It is.
Okay. And so you're starting out 3,000 megawatts, or at least ultimately that's where you're headed. And then you're planning to take 1,500 south. Does that mean you're thinking you'll be dropping off 1,500 in Delta, or maybe it's distributing out the other lines?
That's an open question. Right now we're building for an ultimate capacity of 3,000 megawatts through both systems, from top down to the bottom of the line, and that it'll happen in phases. As the market changes and matures, that'll become more clear with time. But the initial phase is a 1,500 capacity phase, DC phase, and AC phase that has the potential to increase to 3,000 for the full length of the line.
Okay. And then at the Wyoming, did I understand correctly? There's a wind plant there.
Yes.
It does not.
And is that at 3,000 megawatts, or?
So I'll take that question. So among the Anschutz Corporation's investments are oil and gas transmission pipelines and wind, yes. So there's a wind project located at the northern site of the terminal that would be estimated to have over 3,500 megawatts of nameplate capacity. So it's a little bit more than the transmission capacity not being the same as generation capacity. But the northern terminal will also be connected into the Wyoming grid, into the local system. So it's going to provide interconnection with the other local systems in the area, and Western Area Power Administration, who, as I mentioned, was a joint lead on the EIS and sees the value of being able to connect their, what do they call it, the Mountain West region and their desert region. So there'll be some connectivity provided for WAPA as well.
Okay, yeah, I do see that on the grid. Grid you drew. Okay, thank you.
And I would just add, I don't blame you for not being there at the beginning. That's one of the challenges of a long project like this, is everybody has changed along the way. And so again, I just reiterate how much we appreciate how the state has stayed with us. And, there's been changes in president on down to mayors who have changed over the course of the project. And that's certainly a challenge with these long development cycles. And so just really thankful for the opportunity to update you and to be invited back and to have some different news to share than we would have at the very beginning.
I've got a couple of questions. This will be wind, so you've got new infrastructure and transmission and so forth. What is your bus bar price when you get it delivered? The estimation?
I would say we anticipate being able to be very competitive with prices that are available in Southern California, Arizona, Nevada. Another thing that's unique about both our wind projects and the transmission projects, and specifically with the wind project, is we started down this journey without the certainty of a PPA or any pricing in place. So there were not predetermined customer contracts. So this is all a private capital at-risk projects with the idea that there's a market that needs this sort of power. The grid, certainly for all the resilience and capacity issues that we talked about, is very much needed. But we don't have a contracted price for the power that the wind project would be able to provide. I would say that's unusual in the United States. No one else does it that
So
way.
when you say the price, the market price in California or Nevada, that's a lot higher than it is in Utah,
We also have to account for the cost of,
right?
that's definitely part of the
Well,
economics.
you haven't told me a
of going on.
price.
I don't have one to share.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Have you hired any employees here, permanent residents?
Of Transwest Express?
Uh-huh.
No. Transwest Express is a development company, has hired a lot of contractors. So companies like title companies, legal support, geotech,
Oh, there's 15 or 16. different-
environmental
yeah.
companies, surveys, SWCA,
But
environmental
you have no
consultants.
permanent employees here in the state?
And state, no, other than where we're based, which is Colorado.
So the only benefit really is the property tax to the counties, right?
With that. I think there's a great benefit in the existence of the line. It's improving a grid that benefits everybody. It's
Well, it doesn't, if somebody wants to pay your property one to buy in Utah, which is a California market price, that's not competitive to Utah rates.
but the line brings more benefit. Supplying electricity, which Utah supplies all.
It brings wind power.
But it can carry a lot. It can carry any kind of power. It's a major investment structure that benefits all industries and all people in the state of Utah.
I'm sure the wind blows a lot in Wyoming, and you've done your studies. What's the average capacity you'll be carrying on that line as far as megawatts?
Yeah, so the estimated nameplate capacity is 3,500 megawatts. For the wind project, we have not yet selected the final turbine models or vendors. We estimate that would produce, once the project is up and running, about 12 million megawatt hours of electricity every year. So the capacity factor obviously changes by the season. So winter is extremely windy in Wyoming, so we're looking at north of 50% capacity factors, and certainly over 40 the rest of the year. So it's a very high capacity wind generation site that hosts the best wind resources available in the country, class 5, 6, and 7, as ranked by the National Renewable Energy Lab.
So you've yet to convince me of what the real other than the transmission line being there that could possibly carry other power generation, because the market price is not going to be fit into our portfolio price here.
Well, Chair Albrecht, I would suggest that would be similar to looking at the railroad over 150 years ago and thinking, well, they're just trying to get to California.
I
so
think there's a
what-
lot of difference between a railroad carrying freight and a power line.
Yeah.
But, thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Representative Roner.
I guess I'm a little confused, if you'll help me just a little bit here. You're going to use Utah's land, we're going to get some taxes out of this, you're going to hire a few Utah people to build this transmission line, correct? You will, I mean, the people that are building the transmission line will be Utah employees, right? So that will be a benefit to Utah only. But once you get it done, the cost of the electricity is going to be too expensive for Utah citizens or companies to use. Is that what you're saying?
No, we don't know what because the cost hasn't been negotiated yet.
But if
it's
we use
emerging line.
California's rates, there's no way that Utah citizens from that, correct?
It may be the case that Utahns may not want to buy power off of this line because it's meant for a different market in California. But there will be opportunities to put power on the line and ship power out. And Utah is in the business of generating electricity for sale. That's a very large industry in the state of Utah.
Okay,
So
thank you.
It's not just an on and off ramp in Delta that provides an opportunity for for Utah businesses.
Well, as a legislator, I think that we have a responsibility to our citizens to make sure that any infrastructure or anything that's put in, that it comes back and helps our communities. So I'm concerned. I see the tax incentive at the beginning, but long-term, we still need to be concerned about our citizens.
Thank you. Senator Bluen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you guys for visiting today. Just wondering, we're sending a bunch of hopefully cheaper power to California. Could this drive down market prices in California and contribute to lower prices like on the energy imbalance market and that sort of kind of mechanism and lower regional power prices that way?
Yes, there's a potential for that. But that would be determined in a market when the pricing for the electricity is determined with a buyer. Yeah, but it does have that economic pressure to drive prices down.
Thank you.
Yes.
Senator Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize for coming in late, so I may have missed this, but just a question. So we have a lot of power generation in the state, wind, solar, geothermal, and others that actually aren't being utilized by Utah, but actually is going to California and other states. Is any of that power on your line going to California or other states? Are any of those facilities using your transmission to move that power?
So that hasn't yet to be determined. The
Okay.
solicitation for moving power on the southern portion of the line, the AC portion of the line, that'll happen in the future with.
Okay.
That there will be those opportunities. There'll be an open solicitation that's FERC regulated, and when there's capacity and we want to fill the capacity, then it goes out. Under Utah statute, actually, we have to coordinate with the governor energy office in order to open that solicitation.
Okay, I guess what I was getting at, I guess if that's a possibility of movement, then those companies and the communities they reside in could benefit from it. That's one possible benefit of the state.
Yes, it is. Even if the power that moves on Transwest Express is only generated in Wyoming, it still represents a benefit for local generators because that's power that isn't taking up capacity on other ways to get power out of the state, right?
Okay.
So by interconnecting at IPP, you're building a bigger grid with greater optionality for local power generators to ship power out of the state.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I see no other questions. We appreciate you both being here today and giving us an update. Appreciate you. Thank you. We're going to move to item 4 on the agenda, Fervo Energy. Ben Schroer, Government Affairs and Policy. Glad to have you here today. I'm sorry I missed your ribbon cutting down there in Milford. Senator
Chair.
Vickers was there, but I was a little bit under the weather. But we wanted you to give a short update on Fervo Energy and geothermal.
See if I can get this to connect. Speaking of transmission connect.
There you
Excellent.
go.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. It's wonderful to be here. My name is Ben Serurier. I lead the Government Affairs and Policy team for Fervo Energy. We're a next-generation geothermal energy developer. I don't know if I may have lost my presentation there.
She'll get it here.
Well, in any case, we're extremely excited to be developing in Utah and helping make Utah the center of, the center of the next generation geothermal industry in the United States and hopefully soon the world. So I'd like to take a little bit of time today to introduce you to, thank you, what we mean when we say next generation geothermal, introduce you to Fervo Energy as a company, and then hopefully spend the bulk of the time talking about our Cape Station project right here in the state of Utah.
So if you can, move it along. We've got a full agenda today and maybe 10, 15 minutes. Can you do that?
Yep, sure thing.
All right, thank you.
So next generation geothermal, and I don't know if this is going to work, but you have your materials before you. Hopefully they're provided to the committee. Thank you. So geothermal is a step change in the technology that has been deployed to date to develop what we consider conventional geothermal, some of which is already existing and operating in the state. The Blundell plant, Southwest Utah, is one of these plants. In conventional geothermal, you are seeking very unique subsurface geologic conditions, permeable rock, significantly high heat, and the presence of water, sort of the main characteristics. Those are fairly unusual, and it's very risky to explore for them and therefore very expensive. What Fervo Energy is doing is we're taking the technologies that have been so successful in developing unconventional oil and gas, developing the shale boom in the US, horizontal drilling, well stimulation, advances in seismic, microseismic, and fiber optic sensing in the subsurface, and applying those technologies to hot, dry rock. These are big pieces of granite. It's hard rock. It's deep in the earth. It's really hot. We drill down horizontally. We stimulate the well. We increase the permeability of the well. We pump down water. It gets hot. We pump it out as steam. And what's great about this is that we can replicate it. We can build out entire basins for geothermal. It's clean 24/7 power. And that's what we're doing at Cape Station. So we'll jump ahead to slide 5. Cape Station is the world's first enhanced geothermal project. We held a groundbreaking to celebrate this event just a couple weeks ago, which was fantastic, with representatives from local, state, and federal governments represented and supportive. This project will come online in 2 phases. The first phase is 90 megawatts, generating electricity in 2026. And a second phase, 283 megawatts, generating power in 2028. We received a green light from the Bureau of Land Management to begin exploration drilling earlier this year, and we're already seeing excellent results from the first number of wells that we have drilled already. I'm actually heading down there tomorrow, so might have a new update on what the well situation is even then. The progress is really happening on a daily basis. What's exciting about this is multiple fold, but I want to focus a little bit on the economic opportunity and details. We, in Q&A, happy to talk more about the drilling plan and operations, but jumping to slide 7, this is a project that over its lifetime we expect to total about $1.5 billion to $2 billion in capital investment. It's the first of its kind project anywhere in the world and would be the second largest geothermal energy project in the US when it's completed. It's a total step change in how we're doing geothermal energy. One of the things that's interesting about this project is the amount of drilling that it requires, and drilling is terribly expensive at the moment. Though cost, declines are coming through learning by doing and technology improvements. And so what we're actually investing in is not just a one-time investment as we drill the wells, but first of all, a whole drill operation plan that takes multiple years and will continue into the future as we have to drill additional wells for makeup drilling to optimize the plant performance. So that's not considered permanent employment, but it is continuous operation of drill rigs. We're continuously putting that money into the Milford, Beaver County community. And that's on top of the additional construction, local apprenticeship, pipe fitters, wire, all sorts of electricians. The amount of infrastructure investment that happens in both the construction and ongoing phases, whether they're contractors that we're sourcing from the local community or they're permanent employees of Fervo as we built out a plant of this size, is truly tremendous, particularly for a community like Milford, which has seen some ups and downs in the vagaries of the international global commodities market recently. In order, and moving to slide 8, in order to bring the true promise of advanced geothermal to the state and to make Utah really the epicenter of this revolution in clean, firm energy generation, I would propose sort of 3 broad areas of focus for the legislature. The first being encouraging investment in this type of high-cost, clean, firm energy generation. Geothermal is not generally considered in a lot of the high-cost infrastructure tax credit or the minerals exploration tax credit, though we are producing a subsurface resource. I like to think of our wells as each one a little bit of a heat mine as we dig down into the earth and extract heat for energy and steam generation. I think it's worth modernizing the Geothermal Resource Conservation Act, which was originally passed in the 80s, but has taken a couple additions here and there. I think the last one was 2016. But to think about how this new technology and the way water rights are considered and how these new operations factor into what the existing statute looks like so that we foster this innovation and allow investment to flow to this state and not your neighbors. And finally, to think about, to the conversation earlier in this hearing, how we can best use this power in the state. And that's really, in a lot of questions, up to the utilities to buy the power and the PSC thinking about planning transmission lines and such. For us to predictably make that sort of commitment of capital, $1.5 billion, $2 billion, we really need to have an understanding of what the offtake opportunities look like. And until we see that sort of commitment and the need for clean, firm power, which I think is growing across the West, until we see that in Utah specifically, there's a lot of demand, frankly, elsewhere in the West. And given our profit motive, are drawn to those existing opportunities, but would love nothing more than to bring that, keep it in state here in Utah. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the operations, the technology, or what we can do to help lead Utah forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. We got some questions. Senator Vickers.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to be down there the other day. It was a lot. And so talk about your relationship with Forge, which was the federal project, the research project, working in conjunction with the University of Utah there near Milford, and how that kind of relates to what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. And it's great to have both our representatives here on this committee. The Forge partnership has been fantastic. An opportunity to see where the federal government partners with state institutions like Utah State and local communities to put in that initial capital to develop out what a technology looks like. Forge did some pioneering work to think about what an enhanced geothermal system looks like, how it operates, what that rock, how that behaves in the subsurface. We can model out a lot of geologic opportunities, but until you actually drill down and see how it operates down there, you don't really know, right? It's pretty far under the earth. And so Forge, having taken that initial risk and proven that out as a research project, opened the door for Fervo to deploy capital and create a privately funded capital opportunity off of that. And so they have a couple wells in the subsurface. We're looking at doing 100 plus. So the scale of what we're envisioning is a real step change, an order of magnitude different, but it's built on a foundation of that partnership, and that's going to just continue into the future.
Yeah, and so you probably mentioned, was it like 480 megawatts or?
Yeah, 383.
Yeah, okay, and that's base,
373.
and that's base load power, so it's.
That's right.
Dispatchable base load power we keep talking
That's-
about, so,
That's right. It's about the most valuable power that you can get on the market these days.
yeah, thanks.
Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Glad to hear about this project. What's the expectation, two kind of technical questions. Expectation for how long a particular well lasts? Do you exhaust the heat in the rock, or is that, do you anticipate in perpetuity?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I know our engineering and resource team always gets nervous when I get asked technical questions. But, so geothermal energy on the whole is inexhaustible. It truly is millennium's amount of energy, and it does regenerate over time. However, we are locally extracting heat faster than the natural transmission through the rock. So we model out what, depending on the rock geology, the lithology, the pressure and the water that we're pumping through that particular fracture in the rock, we can get a really clear idea in real-time monitoring from sensors that are down under the earth about how we're depleting that heat and what that decline rate looks like. And so we plan for 30+ years of operation, right? The length of the contracts that we'd like to sign, and hopefully in perpetuity, we can keep operating this plant. The key is if we're depleting one a little too fast, one's maybe going slower, we can drill an additional well. It's called makeup drilling. It's common in the industry. We factor it into the operations. It's not a huge part of the drilling profile, but it does exist. And so we can drill another well, knowing what we know now about where the heat is and what the rock might perform better, and basically kind of adjust the plant maybe a little bit this way, and it operates a lot better. So there are those mid-course corrections depending on how that operates, but it is factored into the operations and it's expected.
What kind of water usage do you need for these?
Yeah, it's a great question. So ultimately, it's a closed loop system, right? No water actually touches the air. The water that's the subsurface becomes the water that's pumped right back down. We don't need to use potable water. In fact, the terminology hot, dry rock that I used earlier is a bit of a misnomer. The rock at that depth is saturated. Hot, soggy rock might be more appropriate. Doesn't pull quite as well, so we don't say it as often. But we liberate some of that water, and that contributes to our overall water usage profile. But most of the water is non-potable water, brine, that we take from other reservoirs deep in the subsurface. No water that's otherwise used for municipal or residential drinking or agricultural uses is used. And so we can combine a bunch of different types of non-potable water to make up whatever that water quantity we need.
So I'm hearing fairly minimal in terms of drawing from.
That's right. That's right. First of all, from an economic basis, procuring potable water is very expensive and would make it an uneconomic operation. And in addition to that, most of our water is non-consumed. The only consumptive water use that we really experience is in the drilling operation, which is unavoidable since drilling is, you require to cycle water through the well to take basically the waste out. But at the end of the day, that's a very small portion of the overall water usage, most of which is not consumed.
Thank you. Yeah.
Senator Bluen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is exciting stuff. I'm really excited about Utah's opportunity here. Going back to the earlier discussion about Transwest, just generally, do you guys have the transmission capacity you need down there? Is there anything that needs to be done to facilitate that project at all?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So we are planning to interconnect to an existing, I think it's 345 kV line that's down. There's about 4 other renewable energy projects down there in the little Milford Renewable Energy Corridor: wind, solar, renewable natural gas, and geothermal existing. So we're connecting to that line and working through that process, which is for jurisdictional. Ironically, I will note, we expect, and frankly, the geologic resource in that area could probably withstand a gigawatt-sized project, right? We're limited by the transmission capacity. I don't think economically we alone would shoulder that cost. We're a 6-year-old startup company that's venture-backed. But when you think about the overall grid and we think about what sort of investments can unlock additional resources and investment in the state, surely more transmission capacity in that renewable energy corridor would support additional capital investment.
So hypothetically, if we did something like Texas has done with the competitive renewable energy zones and building out, lines as a state, we could unlock a bunch more. I'm not suggesting that right now, but-
Overlying, yeah, if we looked at that map, those opportunities on top of a geologic resource map, we have a number of very promising opportunities a little bit north of where we are and also more in that area. There's a ton of opportunity in Utah.
Cool. Could you talk just briefly, I think there's some kind of almost like storage capability potentially as an opportunity here, like you can pump more water down and store it down there and then pull it up and generate even more power. Is that, I think that's in the future maybe, but that's a really cool opportunity to
Thanks, Senators.
help balance out the grid.
Jumping to EGS, geothermal 2.0 here. Yeah, so historically that baseload operation is what that flat generation shape, that's what the market's procuring right now, and that's what we're prepared to sell. That's a general geothermal operation profile. But with this engineering approach, unlike conventional geothermal, this new generation type, we can pump water down, basically put our finger over the spigot on the steam that comes out, keep pumping water down, build up heat, build up pressure, and then take our finger off the spigot. And the effect of that is to ramp down and then overproduce, overgenerate later on. And we anticipate that's something that's going to be very valuable in the market as we try to load follow and try to integrate some of these variable renewables that have perhaps less predictable generation profiles. And that's something that's brand new for geothermal. We've proved it out at our commercial scale pilot project in Nevada. We've proved out what we expected. There's a lot of work that needs to be done before it becomes a commercial product, but that's a new frontier that we're excited to explore.
Excellent. Thank you. This is, I'm sold on geothermal. I think it can do a lot of what we're hearing with nuclear and some other opportunities there. And Utah is one of the few places we can do it. So let's go.
Thank you.
Chair Hinkins.
Thank you. And I was just wondering, what temperature do you expect the water to be, and how far down do you expect to drill to get that? Because I know Razor Technologies had, they were operating with like 120 degrees or 140 degrees, and the sooner they get the water back in the ground, the less time it takes to reheat the water. So.
Yeah, so we're using off-the-shelf binary cycle technology, which can operate as low as 150 degrees Celsius. We're seeing temperatures significantly higher than that. Don't want to give away too much, considering that that's something that we discovered by drilling down there and is integral to our commercial operation. But we have been impressed by the heat resource in that region. It has overperformed our modeling expectations, which is always what you like to see. And everything above 200 degrees C is really very good for us, though we can operate at lower temperatures. Basically, higher temperature that's more shallow means it's a more economic project. If we have to drill deeper, it just means more capital expenditure on our part and a longer payback period. So if we get a hotter temperature, or if that temperature is just shallower, both of which make the economics of the project look better. But there isn't necessarily one area that is where it's not necessarily possible. It just means we might have to drill deeper or something like that.
You need more temperature, you just drill deeper?
That's right.
Blundell plant's been there for, what, 50, 60 years, and so, I mean, the longevity
1984.
of this is, what was it?
1984, I believe it came online.
And so, yeah, it's a great resource, and we appreciate you being here in Utah.
Thank you.
Representative McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question for you. So I, as a younger man living in Las Vegas, I used to work actually as a roughneck on a water drilling rig. And we did a lot of drilling in a lot of different areas. And one of the problems that we ran into a lot was surface stability type issues over time, over long periods of time. What kind of research has your company done to that, and how that affects the landscape, as well as, potential, earthquake or seismic activity type stuff?
Thank you, Representative. It's a great question. So we've done a ton of research. Our co-founder and CTO actually did his PhD research on this exact question, and we work very closely with the USGS. And so both our drilling in Nevada and our drilling operations in Utah, we've implemented a bespoke USGS, it's called a green light, yellow light, red light, stoplight type system, where as we're continuously monitoring the system, we look for what we see to be trigger signs as to whether there might be instability issues going on. And so far, we've had absolutely nothing trigger any of the surface or subsurface monitors. Something that we like to joke about, but turns out is actually pretty awesome, is that the recent Taylor Swift concert in Seattle actually triggered a larger earthquake than anything we've seen in our EGS drilling operations.
Thank you. And would you say that has anything to do with the composition of the rock, of the material, or is it just the nature
Yeah, that's
of
right.
the technology of the drilling?
It's a great question. We are so deep, we're looking at 10,000 feet deep, so that already is muting some of those impacts. We just aren't moving enough fluid or rock through that strata to create instability. But also, the type of EGS operation that we're looking at is basically working with the rock, working with faults. And it's a little bit different in this regard than some of the shale development, where we're trying to create stability, open up fissures in the rock as easily as we can, but then create stability from then on. We actually don't want any instability action because that's quite problematic, closes fractures and stuff like that. And finally, we can site away from natural fault lines. Unlike oil and gas, which might have to go to where the oil and gas is, or conventional geothermal, which has to go to where the existing resource conditions are, we can engineer wherever we see fit. And so that can help us move away from natural fault lines and really mitigate that hazard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Milner.
Just a question that I'm probably going to make all your other folks nervous, but if you're thinking, you've obviously done a lot of work, making a real investment in this. If you think about 20 years out, what potential role could geothermal play in helping Utah meet its energy needs?
No, it's a great question. I makes us the most excited, frankly. It's that idea about clean, firm power meeting the economic and energy needs of this state and the whole West. Right now, the entire Western U.S. is capacity constrained. Everyone's trying to get clean, firm power, and Utah has it. And the ability for Utah, their communities, the economy, to attract manufacturing, attract data centers, to attract the high-value modern economy that this state has been a leader in, is going to require types of power like this. And so there's gigawatts and gigawatts of potential in the state. And to be able to supply that with an in-state resource is really our great hope for the Beehive State.
What picture does this have the potential to provide? 1% of our power needs, 2% of our power needs, 5% of our power needs?
It's
I know it's very
it's
hard.
not a question. It's not a question that we've modeled out. I think across the U.S., the Department of Energy has done a study recently, so it's somewhat conservative because it predated a lot of this technological improvement, that looked at 10% of energy needs of the country being met with enhanced geothermal or conventional geothermal systems. And that was by 2050. I think that's quite conservative, and I think it's especially conservative for a state like Utah, which has such a great resource. But it's a great question to ask the Public Service Commission to look into, or some of the in-state utilities to do some of that modeling in their integrated resource planning.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Shipp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does your project, to be successful, does it require current and/or future tax credits to be successful, or?
Yeah, it's a good question. So geothermal historically has not benefited from the tax credits that have been so successful for the wind and solar industry. For example, until the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, we only had a 10% ITC available to the geothermal industry. Now, as those technology credits move to be technology neutral in 2025, we will have that benefit open to us again. But outside of that, we receive less federal support than any other technology, particularly from the demonstration side. Our project is roughly the same size as the UAMPS small modular reactor project, which is receiving about $1.5 billion to $4 billion in cost share with the Department of Energy. We receive $0 of the same type from the federal government, and really have only had a couple research grants with Forge to support that development. So while we don't count on that sort of tax credit or development grant opportunity, everything would help when you're building a first of its kind project.
But it's not, the success or failure isn't dependent on a tax credit, is my question.
Frankly, that's yet to be seen. With $1.5 billion to $2 billion in capital expenditure, if that goes up, by 10% or so, that starts to eat into the bottom line significantly. And if we see where rates have continued to be, we don't have tax equity for this project. Project finance has been cool on the opportunity because it's a brand new technology, right? This isn't a deployment, we're deploying at scale, but it's the first of its kind. And so getting capital markets comfortable with that is part of the goal of this project. I would not be surprised if this project is successful operationally, but barely successful, if that, on an economic basis, simply because we don't enjoy the commercialization support that many other commercializing and nascent clean firm technologies enjoy.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Just a little heads up, you might tell people you're drilling for lithium and get the credits and.
We have an entire direct air capture operation and business
Because there'd be lots of
opportunity.
minerals besides lithium that you could possibly do that, so.
Appreciate that. It's something we're exploring for sure.
That's why they call it the Mineral Mountains.
That's right. That's right.
Anyway, I don't see any other questions. Thanks, Ben. That was a very interesting discussion. Appreciate
Thank
you
you very
being
much,
here.
Chair and Committee.
We're going to move to item 5, legislative audit of Intermountain Power Agency. Brian Dean, Deputy Auditor General, and Matthias Boone, Senior Audit Supervisor. Welcome, gentlemen. And ladies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Introduce myself. I'm Brian Dean. I'm the Deputy Auditor General, and with me is Matthias Boone, who was the supervisor of this audit, and Abigail Armstrong and Gentry Wiley, who were the staff of this audit. To start off, we do appreciate the efforts and the work that we did with IPA and other project participants. We definitely appreciated their expertise and professionalism throughout this. The Legislative Audit Subcommittee prioritized this audit of the Intermountain Power Agency, the purpose of which was to ensure effective operations and the protection of Utah residents and resources. The report has 11 recommendations, which can be found on page 59 of the report. One thing I want to make a point of right up front is the majority of the recommendations are directed towards the legislature because there's some big policy questions that need to be asked here. And so with that being said, Mr. Chair, if it's okay, I'll have Matthias kind of start off with the findings of the audit.
Very good. Gotta get him hooked up here.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. It's great to be with you this morning. Many of you in this committee may already understand the nature of the Intermountain Power Project. We wanted to just provide a high-level summary of the different players, as there are many. The project itself is the power plant in Millard County, and it includes the generation station, supporting facilities, transmission lines that help that deliver the electricity to the different participants. IPA is the collective 23 Utah municipalities that has political subdivision status within the state. The project also has 2 governing bodies, the IPA board, which represents those Utah members, and the coordinating committee, which is a combination of California and Utah participants, California having a 79% vote, Utah having a 21% vote on that committee. LA, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, manages the day-to-day operations of the project and oversees the staff at the plant. Wanted to just highlight also that the scope of this audit is not the decommissioning of the plant. Rather, it provides a state-level governance perspective on how this project has acted to this point, starting in the 1970s, and gives you kind of a glimpse of where improved governance could be had. To dive right into Chapter 1, we focus on the fact that IPA was set up as an interlocal entity, a governmental entity of the state of Utah. And in the Interlocal Act, their requirements are that they are to balance benefits to both project participants and for the general welfare of the state. They're intended to benefit the state. They enshrined this commitment in their 1977 organizational agreement and further made verbal agreements with state leaders to exclusively take Utah coal and to keep a workforce in rural Utah. And many of the benefits of the project can be found on page I believe it's 9 of the report.
One of the things we want to highlight here is that the vision and direction of the project has changed since it was created in 1977. You can see, I want to make it clear that the plant provides there's benefit to the local community, and the benefits are there. But one of the things we want to highlight is that to the original commitments, there has been diminishing benefits to the state. As you can see on the left-hand side of this, that the use of coal, of Utah coal, that's what the figure on the left is showing, is that is diminishing, and when the IPP renewed comes on, that'll be eliminated. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the staffing. That's one of the big economic development benefits that was promised. And so in the mid to late 90s, they were staffing over 600 full-time employees down there at the plant. That number has dropped off, and it has continued to decline. Moving forward, there will be a staff there, but it's projected to be at most about 100, 120. And so, so we wanted to just highlight that there is still benefit to the state, but that benefit is diminishing.
Right, and also checking in on what was the original vision of the project versus the reality today. Historical documents showed that these 23 municipalities were looking for available, affordable power. Over the life of this project, since 1986, when generation began, Utah has consumed just 2% of this project's power over the life of the project. We highlight here the policy question for the legislature. This is the question that raises from this chapter. Is this diminished benefit still desired for the legislatures moving forward, or is further action desired based off of those early commitments? Chapter 2 focuses on where greater improved governance is needed for this project. So we highlight in the report 3 examples where California has strongly influenced the direction and decisions of this project over time. Wanted to highlight just one for you today, where in the late 1990s, the utility industry was in a bit of turmoil, and it led the California participants to not view this project as competitive anymore. And so they requested a reduction of plant costs, and that led to a 14% decline in 1 year of plant staffing, and for IP to be removed from that commitment to exclusively use Utah coal. They began from here on to use out-of-state coal in some years. So that we highlight that because those were the 2 original agreements the project made early on. On the right, this is a PowerPoint presentation that was made to the Los Angeles City Council by LADWP. And in that, they highlight their strong planning for the region. Utah will be a renewable hub of geothermal, solar, and other renewable sources. We draw a contrast here on the next slide that Utah's planning has not been strong. But the recommendation that we draw from this slide is simply how much influence is it appropriate for an out-of-state government entity to influence the operations of an in-state government entity? So like I said, we focused on areas. You may recall the state energy policy that we presented earlier this year, and how with an any of the above energy policy, that there's not actually strong targets that go along with that. The policy itself is great. The target, that we don't have goals or targets to help accomplish that. So we found that IPA is in a similar situation to be influenced by out-of-state pressures. And particularly, we note just the first one in this presentation, a lack of strong planning, goals, measures, preferences, priorities, nothing that's been formalized on the Utah side as we saw on the California side for this project moving forward.
I want to pause you on this real quick to just draw your attention, because a lot of the issues that we find in this report and the recommendations that we bring forward center around governance. Our office has done this for a lot of years. And one of the things we find is when there's a lot of issues downriver, we can chase after those all day, and they're important to address. But if we do not fix the big problem up top, the governance. Like when we talk about are the general benefits to the state being protected, this comes back to, is there a governance issue? And so we make, there is precedence for the legislature that has changed the governance structure of political subdivision likes entities. Like, for example, there was audits done back in 2014 by our Office of the Utah Transit Authority and UTA. And one of the things that the legislature decided to, in response to those, is they changed the governance structure of what was, of, who was on that board, who was overseeing that board, how they were appointed. We make a number of recommendations. There's no one, there's a number of things the legislature could do. But at the end of the day, as this political subdivision, this is a power that is vested in the legislature. It's for the legislature to decide what is going to be the governance structure of this entity moving forward. And so we make these points here and we give these options here, and we feel that it's very important, and that's why we're highlighting it. IPA has expressed some concerns, and again, we see this a lot of times when we talk about governance changes, that it could have some effects, potentially interfere with some of their contracts and bonding covenants. But at the end of the day, we're not, again, this is a policy decision. Of course, you'd have to weigh the pros and the cons and discuss this, but we saw the same arguments with UTA. It's going to have this effect, and it doesn't. It didn't. And so what we're saying here is that the governance and the oversight structure is a policy decision that is best left in the hands of the legislature, and so that's why we're making these recommendations.
The first option here, change IPA's governance requirements in existing statute, is the basis for our next chapter, Chapter 3. And there's 4 chapters, so we're coming to an end here. Simply, we want to state that IPA was set up as a governmental entity and is therefore not a private entity. And many benefits have been afforded to them over time.
And some of the benefits, IPA, again, one of the things we often hear is IPA, they don't receive public appropriations. They pay their taxes, but they have received substantial governmental benefits as a whole. Like, for example, we show here that IPA has issued billions of dollars in municipal bonds between its first and subsequent rounds of financing. And as of 2022, through those rounds of bonding, 93% of them of all IPA's financing has come from tax-exempt bonds. They also have other unique carve-outs and structures that apply to them. We're going to talk more about their unique tax structure, that instead of getting assessed a tax, they pay a fee in lieu of ad valorem tax instead of like the typical property tax, so they can negotiate these taxes. And we found some issues with that we will discuss, but again, they've received substantial public benefits that have been afforded to them by the legislature. And so we look at these as it's for the legislature to determine how those look moving forward and with their governance structure and the benefits that they receive.
We also address some of the exemptions from common elements of governance in Chapter 3. Some of those are provided here for you. And really, I think the issue here, to just summarize this chapter, is this entity has been approved to exist until 2077. And it's up for the legislature to determine whether the benefits and the exemptions that have been afforded the project over its life since the 70s, generation began in 86, if those benefits and exemptions are still desired moving forward. Moving on to our final chapter, this chapter focuses on the relations between the host county, Millard County, and IPA as the project entity.
And we want to touch upon these again, back on the structure of IPA. They're unlike any entity that we could find in the state with their structure and everything. And so the taxes is another unique thing. The 2 statutory provisions where we talk about that a benefit could be projecting some unintended and potentially negative consequences for the host county and Millard County. This figure demonstrates the interlocal relationship defined in the Interlocal Cooperation Act, but the relationship between the interlocal entity and a host county is not specified. And so we want to just talk about these 2 in particularly, the taxes and then the impact alleviation.
Okay, so with regard to the tax issue, IPA pays, as Brian said, a fee in lieu of ad valorem property tax. And according to the Tax Commission, it's the only entity in the state that pays something like this. Further, IPA is the only centrally assessed property that is permitted statutorily to negotiate their taxes. And the original intent of that was actually to benefit both Millard County and IPA. They can come to an agreement on their taxes outside of the normal tax commission property assessment process. So we've seen instances where this negotiation model has worked, but also acknowledge many instances where it has not. And so the slide here shows that IPA and Millard County signed agreements 11 of 20 years possible, and IPA appealed their taxes 26 of 38 possible years. Compounding this further is the reality of the truth in taxation model, where a county it's in how a county fulfills their annual budget. So any decrease in the tax burden of IPA through appeals or negotiations has to be made up from the other tax revenue sources, and often that comes on the back of Millard County residents to make up the difference. And it should be noted too that California, as the major purchasers, are the ones paying the taxes, so any tax breaks are given to them where other Millard County residents are needing to make up the difference. That's a statutorily touch point that we focus on. The other is impact alleviations.
One of the things that we found is, when we think of impact alleviation, the power plant in a host county, it incurs significant impact on the county. In fact, Millard County, reported to us working with them, the significant impact that the plant has on the county. This impact ranges from environmental to infrastructure to public safety and so forth. IPA has paid $21 million in impact alleviation payments to Millard County, but they've also received $17 million in impact alleviation credits on their taxes to Millard County. So again, as we talk about the truth in taxation, this has an impact on Millard County, and we're unsure why that alleviation credit was allowed, statutorily allowed, but it is a point that we bring up that the legislature may want to reconsider. And so with that being said, Mr. Chair, that kind of highlights the findings of this audit, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Questions? Representative Lyman.
Thank you, and thanks for the report. The centrally assessed taxes are always a real concern to counties. I'm county commissioner for 8 years in San Juan County, so I dealt a lot with those things. The concern that I always have when we're talking about this, number one, is these companies and these businesses are kind of the foundational bedrock of our communities, and you've been respectful to IPA, but what I see happen so often is that it pits government agencies against producers who are out there trying to make a living. I have no problem with IPA contesting the evaluations. I think it is kind of it's designed for that, to come and say, hey, you gave us an assessment, we disagree with it on these factors, and they make their argument. Both sides should come with their best arguments to the tax commission. The tax commission should be able to stand by their valuations, and sometimes I've seen them kind of fold under pressure for whatever reason. By the same token, I see clerks and county officials that sometimes go after these companies as if they're the evil cause of your property taxes going up. The real cause of property taxes going up is because government is spending more of their money. And in San Juan County, what I'd love to see is a little bit of advocacy for the industries that rely on the public lands, instead of just shutting down the public lands and watching as, at one time San Juan County had the second highest centrally assessed value of any county in the state. They were second only to Salt Lake County because of Kennecott copper. But we've watched that just basically go away, and instead of the state coming and saying, hey, these industries are important to these small communities, they actually get on the other side and say, well, we think maybe San Juan County shouldn't have SILA sections in their county anymore. We think maybe a national monument would be a good thing for San Juan County. And we watched the cattle go away. We watched and I'm on my soapbox again, Chair, but that's what I would love to see is a little bit of authentic advocacy for the companies that pay these bills, that build our schools, that build our communities with their property taxes, and some respect towards them, and also for Utah just to step up and advocate for industries that make sense in these smaller communities. I support what you're doing with IPA, but I also support IPA and what they're trying to accomplish for their business model. And I'd love a response on that. It's not really a question, but I'd love a response and how you feel about that.
That was a soapbox,
I know.
no question.
I would love, am I wrong about this?
Can I try to take a stab at that? Absolutely. The right to appeal is I mean, that's built into the system, and it's good. I mean, to have these different things. What makes it unique here in this sense is that we're supposed to have this negotiated settlement. You know, again, it's a unique structure than any other state. One of the things we always want to be mindful of, especially with small communities and all this, when other corporations that maybe have the legal resources and things to continue to fight to lower their taxes. And again, we're looking at the benefit, and some of these smaller communities don't have the resources to go toe-to-toe with that. But again, we're looking at when we reduce these taxes here, and we want them to be fair. They need to be, that's the process. It needs to be fair. But when it's not fair, the benefit of this, the costs come to Utah, the benefits go outside of Utah. And so we want to make sure that it's a system that's equalized and fair across the board. So I do agree with you on that.
Thank you, and I agree with that. And maybe it's an idea that the state would bear a little bit more responsibility on the centrally assessed properties, and rather than leaving it to the counties who really can't stand up to these large corporations, but the state has the resources to be able to do that, and maybe could do a better job of that.
It's not just an issue in Millard, it's an issue in several counties. Representative Jack.
Yeah, thank you for the information. That's me. And yeah, you're wondering, where is he? Just a couple of questions. I see that, the plant came online in '87. In fact, I toured it as a senior at BYU in '87. And then it's going to IPP renewed about 2025, according to the graph. And then I think you said that it has plans to go through 2077.
That's right.
At least as IPP renewed. So there's almost two different power plants, two different models, right? There's the traditional coal plant and then the future gas potential hydrogen plant. As the coal plant is scheduled to be terminated and torn down, I'm assuming that like any other power project, there's like a reclamation fund, a reclamation bond that would go in to pay for tearing that down. Was that within the scope of your audit?
We did not touch upon anything that involves the decommission of the coal plants, so that would, yeah.
In our legislative audit subcommittee yesterday, where IP had a chance to respond to a question like this, they said that there were no grants given to them for the decommissioning and tear down of the plant. We did not identify any other funding available for that.
Okay. Well, yeah, no, it wouldn't be a grant. It would be a fund that they would have
Yeah.
life of the plant. Okay. Well, then I just wondered if that was within the scope of your audit, but the answer is no. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Roner.
Briscoe.
Briscoe, sorry.
Herring. They were sneak in. They were kind enough to allow me to sneak in. Welcome. I'm looking at slide number 5. The original value to the state and local communities has diminished, and you've identified 2 issues that since a peak in 2005, 2006, 2007, there's been a significant drop-off in the number of coal purchased, and that staffing has dropped. Are these the only 2 issues that you've identified that indicate a loss of original value to state and local communities? Did you identify any other issues other than staffing and coal purchase?
These are the 2 that specifically touch on those original verbal agreements, the specific ones made to the governor. We also note that there's a decrease in the tax base as they've depreciated their assets over time, and also identify a shift in the intention to use the power over the life, and it's now become a backup plan for these Utah cities rather than an ongoing source of power. So those are some of the additional diminished benefits that we highlight in the report.
I'm looking at slide 8.
Sure.
Which talks about Utah as a renewable hub. And the gist I got from your analysis of this slide from the Los Angeles Board of Water and Power Commissioners meeting is that California is dictating the use of IPP, and we should have more control over how we use this resource because it's located inside the state of Utah. When that plant, when Scott Matheson was governor and they made arrangements to build that plant in the middle of Utah, I don't think that in their minds, they were seeing the middle of the state of Utah as a place where they would want to build a Transwest facility from wind fields in Wyoming down to the middle of Utah to hook up to a 600,000 volt direct current line that would go straight down to LA. We took a tour several years ago as a legislature. First time I've ever been to the IPP plant. I'd driven past it, got inside. That was an amazing experience. When we got to the control room, I was thinking of all those, those crazy movies about nuclear power shutdowns. You're seeing these windows, these big, broad banks of all these controls, and there's this graphic, this line graphic on the wall. I'm looking at it and going, that doesn't look like Utah. And then I look at it and I look closely, holy heck, it's Southern Cal, it's the LA Basin. That's where all this stuff is going to. They didn't build this to ship power north to the Wasatch Front. They built this thing to ship power to LA. They're paying for this. I mean, a lot of it, but we've also got 23. I'm looking at that slide. I'm looking at wind, I'm looking at solar, I'm looking at geothermal, and I'm thinking we owe a debt of gratitude to the people in Millard County, to the state legislators in the 1970s and 80s, and to Scott Matheson for sticking this thing there. Now, the value of the people who are, my heart goes out to the people who are driving the coal trucks and the people who used to work in the mine 20 years ago, used to work in IPP who are not working there. But those jobs are going to be found in other industries around it. And when we look at the net benefit of the people to that particular plant dropping, but it's going to expand. It's going to expand around that area to other businesses. It's going to expand to other jobs. I guess I'm thinking your scope's a little narrow here.
Representative, is there a question?
I have a question. I'm doing my soapbox.
Okay.
Legislators, I'm pretending I'm a senator. Did you consider, there are 23 on page 66, 67, there are 23 cities that also were part of this governance structure and also received some power. Did you discuss, when you put this audit together, allowing those 23 cities to respond like you allowed Millard City County to respond?
Absolutely, yes. We interviewed each of the representatives and also surveyed the owners, the city councils of those cities as well.
Are their views, did you allow them to write a response to your audit?
No, they were not the auditees of this audit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
IPA, as the organization was.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the audit team and the work that you've done. Just I think the first time we've been able to put light on the governance of this plant. I would just say that I think the representative who was just before me was kind of taking a hook, line, and sinker. What's the diminishing value is, I'll get on my soapbox, a guarantee of 4 coal units, 4 units built out there, and ability to purchase 45,000 acre-feet of water. 2 units were built, California blocked the 3rd and 4th. There's a half the value immediately is gone. And as to count on power, they showed it. They saw the graph that it was Utah's used 2%. Yes, maybe a lion's share is to go to California, but 2%. And the taxation, so to give a company, and I hope we never do this again in the state, and I honor what the legislators did at the time. It was the goal, it says it right in code, is to provide, as they mentioned, benefit for the state of Utah, the overall benefit of Utah, and these municipalities. And that benefit, I don't think, has been realized. But as a political subdivision, they first of all, let me go to taxation. So they can negotiate their taxes and then they appeal? Try being a rural county and deal with that budget. Then impact, is that the impact they pay? Yeah. So, and then the litigation by a rural county to try to collect taxes over this. Yeah, go live and represent that county and see what happens. It's tough for them. I read on page 4 of your audit, and you didn't touch this today, but I was looking at it, and you weren't able to get a full view of the governance of the plant. Can you explain that page?
This was an issue too that we talked about in depth in the audit with the audit subcommittee yesterday. This is not unique. I've been doing this for 24 years, and so this, we were not given access to, with their closed meetings, with their minutes and all of this to see how we see this. And then when we talk about governance again, we come back to the governance things. Are the interests of the state? Is everything happening? Matthias explained earlier the governance structure. You have IPSC that makes, they're the operational Los Angeles Power. They're the operator of the power plant. They set the budget. They have this participants. They have a 79% vote on the decisions. The IPA board that's over them, they can go along. They can approve. We didn't see any time dissensions between these two. And so again, that's where we come back to governance. We didn't have a full line of sight into what was the discussions going on and how did these happen because we did not receive, we didn't receive access to those.
And just to emphasize, this is very uncommon for an entity to refuse us access to meetings and not provide minutes. In fact, I can't recall a time that it's happened before.
Thank you. It's embarrassing too. And then the last item said you were blocked. Can you explain? I'm not going to ask the person's name or what their position was, but somebody was not allowing you full access to even talk to the employees.
Yes, we did. We did have, and this is somebody that's high up in the operational side of it. And it did, we did run into barriers into getting access, and even getting unfiltered information and all of that. And so that's, again, audit standards require us to disclose. We title it "Some Conditions Hindered Audit Work," which required the disclosure of potential risks. And so that's why we put that right up front in page 4 of this audit.
Thank you. I listened in when it was presented yesterday and listened to this, who were really kind of in shock by the lack of transparency for a government entity, which is the status. So I think it's inherent upon this committee and us that we find some governance, do whatever it takes to get governance here, or we'll continue to go forward. And IPP lobbyists have been on the Hill. I counted 22 bills over 12 years that, of course, it takes the legislature to pass, but they didn't work with the commissioners on. So they came and got removed themselves from, they didn't, the legislator voted for it, I mentioned that, removed from Open and Public Meetings Act. That's concerning. And more exclusions like state procurement and government immunity. So I think it's incumbent on us to do something with the governance of IPP and give Utah a little more sight. Let us decide as a state what direction and what resources we're going to use, because it's certainly not happening as a new resource with natural gas. And as they move to IPP renewed, are you aware of if the state was ever contacted about the new plant? Representative Jack mentioned an entirely new plant. Was the state part of that or had an opportunity to provide resources for that?
Again, with
A brief comment. I think IPA says that the legislature in 2012 allowed or approved them to operate and to move to IPP renewed. The reality is the bill itself doesn't mention anything about hydrogen or natural gas. It doesn't talk about anything that's going to happen with the coal units. I think the legislature's view at that time was even limited to knowing what this project would become 10 years later. So
And
Thank
again,
you.
I would just add, Mr. Chair, if it's okay to this again, with our, with obstructions in our line of sight into the onto the operations of this, is that it, yeah, it would be, we'd be unable to say, to answer definitively the involvement that they have. We always hear about discussions, but again, we did not see the documentation to support that.
Thank you. And a project of this size to have some gentleman agreements that weren't really kept or followed or back and forth, it's just, I think I would be in favor of an annual audit of this government entity until we get our arms wrapped around the governance of this industry. So Utah has some say. It's not just, as you said, all weighed by California. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I see no more questions. I'll bring it back to the committee for further action. You have a complete list of the recommendations on page 59. There's 59 and 60. There's 11 recommendations. 9 start with the legislature terminology, so I'll, oh, you got a question? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to point out that, you know, I heard this in an audit committee meeting yesterday and heard you know, the kind of, I guess you may say the positives and the negatives coming out of the audit, but, you know, I want to point out that we have a lot of, it was pointed out yesterday that this particular project is primarily, you know, generated here in Utah, but the energy is used in another state. And that, but I wanted to point out that there's a lot of projects, and I look at my district, I cover 5 counties, and I've got a lot of renewable energies projects. You know, we talked about one just a minute ago with Fervo that is geothermal. At least currently, the contracts will be sending that power out of state. Wind and solar projects, geothermal, others that are, you know, not currently being used in Utah. The uniqueness about this particular company and this particular situation is the political subdivision status. That's really the only reason that, you know, we're here. I also want to point out that as I represent the Delta area, and as I talk to the people, and there are a number of them, people here in the audience and friends of mine, that as I talk to them and talk to you know, about what they want to see happen with the project, because it's been a very beneficial thing to the community over the years. They want to see the project continue to go forward and be viable. And so I think we need to be sensitive to that fact, and we want to make sure that we don't do something that disrupts the current project or the project going forward and allow them to do it. I fully understand why the legislature would question the viability of political subdivision status, and that may be something we address this year. But I just also want to point out that we need to be very considerate, because not only is this project moving forward and is changing shape, but there are other companies now investing a lot of money in that area and potential, and I'm also privy to even some potential other changes in power generation within IPP, IPA that could very well benefit the state of Utah in the future. So I just want to point that out as we go forward, and as I looked at the recommendations, you know, from the audit, and I appreciate, you know, I think that you've done a really good job, and you pointed out, and I have to admit, because I've been involved in this for a couple of years, I didn't learn anything brand new. You know, there were some things that was concerned me, and I think that one of the ones pointed out, Senator Owens just pointed out about, you know, the lack of, I guess, transparency, at least with the meeting and the information previous to when we changed the open meetings law with them. But I still want to reiterate the fact that let's make sure that as we move forward, we're being considerate of the local structure and the local benefits that you know, that the project continues to provide to that community and can potentially provide to the state of Utah in the future. So, like I say, I guess that's my soapbox. I'm not even going to ask if I'm right or wrong, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you, Senator. Senator, do you have a question?
No soapbox or anything. Are we going to hear from IPA at all? I think it'd be interesting to hear their take on the situation.
Their response has been provided to you in writing, and they did respond yesterday at the audit committee.
Okay, I mean, I think it'd be helpful to hear from them too today. You know, we've got a different committee here. I know there's
We've got a
dozens of
big
pages
agenda,
in front
and I
here.
don't think we're going to go there today.
At some point, I think that would be worthwhile having them respond to this as well
They
in person.
responded yesterday at the audit committee.
Right, but different, I think, don't we have the jurisdiction
You have
over this?
all their response right here in front of you.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of good reading to do, but it is always nice to be able to
You've had a few
respond and
days.
ask questions, so.
Thank you. Senator Owens.
Well, thank you. I'd like to make a comment first. I agree 100% with Senator Vickers, and that the difference is political subdivision status and what that allows. What company wouldn't want that benefit in the state of Utah? I mean, and I think it's gotten out of hand from the audit. I think speaks to that. It's a fair audit, and let's fix it. And I am not in any way or favor of hindering the progress of what's the plant that's going on there, gas hydrogen. Haven't ever wanted to and stayed completely away from doing anything that would hinder that. But we have some issues here from your recommendations. So I'd like to make a motion that we open a committee bill file and let the chairs review the recommendations from the Senate President and Speaker.
That motion's in order. For discussion to the motion. Senator Vickers.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out that we probably ought to do some little coordination. I know that, so that we don't duplicate efforts. I know that Senator Sandel had one coming out of the Governor's Economic Opportunity Commission that is going to address some, at least is going to attempt to address some elements of some of the audit recommendations. So I just wanted to point that out, that there are maybe some duplicative efforts, and this also will be heard in Natural Resources this afternoon, so.
Right.
Yeah, but somehow, however we handle that motion, we just need to make sure that whoever's taking charge on that is coordinating with other members of the legislature involved in it.
Yeah, his motion, you want to restate that?
Yes, sure.
Recording in progress.
Oh, finally.
Oh, it's finally.
Yeah. Being a political subdivision of Utah, my comments are just to make sure that Utah has a say here and our citizens, which is our duty and responsibility. So I move to open a committee bill, and let the chairs review the recommendations from the Senate President and Speaker and see which items should be part of the bill. And that will have to come with some coordination, as Senator just said. That's my motion.
Thank you. That motion's in order. Senator Akins and I will take that, and we will coordinate with Senator Sandel. We will coordinate with leadership, and we will coordinate with the Natural Resource Committee that'll hear this. And then we'll bring back a recommendation for a bill file. Further discussion to the motion? Seeing none. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. We'll move forward in that direction. Thank you, auditors. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll move to item 6, the statutory required report from the Project Entity Oversight Committee. We have Greg Todd, the OED Director, Warren Peterson, the Committee Chair, Roger Kilpack, the Vice Chair. Pull up a chair. Chair. Go ahead, Director. State your name.
All right. For some reason, we're not getting it up there. Oh, there we go. All right. I'm Greg Todd, the Director of Office of Energy Development and the Governor's Energy Advisor. Feel an opportunity to spend some time with you today. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Mr. Chair, my name is Warren Peterson. I'm a resident of Millard County. By way of background, sorry, this will sound like a soapbox speech too, perhaps,